Drag performers associated with Drag Queen Story Hour have been mocked and condemned in popular conservative media. Well, that's going to spread, baby. It's going to be in every media except what you've captured, because what you're doing is evil and it's ugly and it's horrifying. Several story hours have been canceled due to credible threats of violence. Don't be violent, but it's not surprising. You're making a provocation. Let's talk about mid-level violence, because that's what this is. I talked about political warfare a while back. When I went on Tim Pool the first time, I was like, political warfare is the most important concept you've never heard of. One of the tools, this is what Antifa does, this is what they all do, this is what Black Lives Matter did, this is what all of these provocations are, is mid-level violence. Drag Queen Story Hour is mid-level violence. It's mid-level cultural violence. Mid-level violence, you could say, is mid-level provocation, or whatever you want to call it, if you don't want to call this violence. Mid-level violence is the I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you game. And then when you either have to submit to this and look weak, because it's the mid-level of violence. It's not actual violence. I didn't hit you, I just didn't touch you. I didn't touch you and didn't touch you, finger in your face. Never touched you, didn't touch you. I'm doing a clear provocation, but it's at a low enough level, because it's mid-level, that either you just have to accept it and you lose and you weaken yourself. In other words, you just let the drag queen be in the classroom. That's your one losing option. Or you overreact and credible threats of violence are made, because obviously the school's not going to, there would be no violence if the adults that run the schools, if the adults that are in law enforcement, if the adults that are in any domain, anywhere, would step in and say, don't do this. You cannot do this. This is not acceptable. People only get pushed to violence when there's no recourse left. And this is how the mid-level violence game works. And this is the game that they're playing with you. They are provoking and provoking and provoking and provoking. And if you don't do anything, they win. And if you do anything, you overreacted. They make you look bad. They write this. Drag performers have been mocked and condemned in popular media. City councils have condemned use of public space. Librarians and queens have received death threats. There's been credible threats of violence. In a few cases, they say armed protesters have shown up to libraries. Then you overreacted and you lose again. You look like you're this overbearing jerk. You look like a fascist, which is how they're going to paint you. This is the communist provocation strategy until they have absolute power. Mid-level violence, and then you either, as they say, cuck yourself. Since we're reading a paper like this, you fold and give in like most of the Republican establishment and let them steamroll you, and you're weak. And every time you do it, you lose more and more of your credibility and you weaken yourself. You demoralize yourself. You demoralize your followers. You demoralize your supporters. You demoralize the people depending on you, and you weaken and weaken and weaken and weaken and weaken. Or you say no and they frame it out as a fascist overreaction, or you actually overreact and they really take that one all the way to the bank. This is the mid-level violence game. This is the game that they're playing. Drag Queen Story Hour is a mid-level violence provocation. You have to understand that that's what it is. It is a strategic provocation. They're not sending strippers because that would be too far. They're sending drag queens because it's fun, in the words of Attorney General of Michigan.